When Eilat Mazar realized she discovered an ancient structure near Jerusalem.
Deep beneath one of the holiest places on Earth, scientists uncovered something nobody expected to find.
In 2019, construction workers in Jerusalem broke through a wall that hadn't been touched for 3,000 years. What they found inside made archaeologists question everything we thought we knew about ancient history. The Israeli government immediately sealed the site, but leaked photos reveal something that could rewrite religious texts forever. The morning of March 15 started like any other day for Yitzhak Cohen. He'd been working construction in Jerusalem's old city for over 20 years. Stone walls, ancient foundations, buried pipes, he'd seen it all. But when his jackhammer hit that particular section of limestone beneath the Western Wall Plaza, something felt different. The stone didn't crack like normal rock. It gave way completely, creating a hole that seemed to swallow his drill bit hole. When Yitzhak peered inside with his flashlight, cold air rushed out like the building had been holding its breath for centuries. "There's something down here," he called to his supervisor. Something big. Within hours, the construction site transformed into an archaeological zone. Dr. Sarah Goldstein, one of Israel's top archaeologists, rappelled into the darkness with her team. What she discovered in those first moments would haunt her for months. The chamber stretched far beyond their lights could reach. Ancient symbols covered every surface, not Hebrew, not Arabic, not any language they recognized immediately. But it was the centerpiece that stopped them cold. A massive stone altar sat in the middle of the chamber, surrounded by 12 smaller structures arranged in a perfect circle. On top of the altar lay an object wrapped in cloth that had somehow survived 3 millennia underground. The fabric looked almost new. Dr. Goldstein reached for her camera, but her equipment malfunctioned. Every electronic device they brought into the chamber either died instantly or captured nothing but static. Something about this place interfered with modern technology in ways that defied explanation. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Before they could properly document anything, government officials arrived. Not archaeologists or museum curators, military personnel with very specific orders. The site was classified immediately. All workers were sworn to secrecy under national security laws. The official story: a minor archaeological find of limited historical value. Nothing to see here. But 3 photographs escaped before the lockdown. A construction worker's phone somehow worked long enough to capture images that would later surface on underground archaeology forums. The images were blurry, taken in haste, but they showed enough to make experts around the world demand answers. The first photo revealed those mysterious symbols carved deep into the chamber walls. Dr. Marcus Webb, a linguist at Oxford who studied the leaked images, made a startling connection. The symbols weren't random, they told a story. A story about something being deliberately hidden away. The second photo showed the altar itself, carved from a single piece of black stone that doesn't exist naturally anywhere in the Middle East. The craftsmanship was impossibly precise for tools available 3,000 years ago. Even with modern equipment, creating something this perfect would challenge today's master stoneworkers. But the third photo revealed the most disturbing detail. Scratches covered the chamber's ceiling. Not decorative carvings, desperate gouges made by fingernails. As if someone had been trapped inside, clawing frantically at stone until their fingers bled. The chamber wasn't just a hiding place. It was a prison. Dr. Goldstein's initial report, leaked by an unnamed source, described evidence of prolonged human habitation within the sealed space. Food containers made from unknown materials. Tools that seemed impossibly advanced for their time period. And most unsettling, a journal written on metal sheets in multiple languages. The journal entries, according to the leaked translation, spoke of keeping the guardian contained until the appointed time. They described something that needed to remain hidden until mankind was ready for the truth that would shatter faith itself. But who was this guardian? And what truth could be so dangerous that it required 3,000 years of concealment? Government officials denied everything. They claimed the leaked photos were fabricated by conspiracy theorists seeking attention. But their denials only raised more questions. Why would military personnel secure an unimportant archaeological site? Why were international experts who expressed interest in studying the find quietly discouraged from pursuing their research? And why did 3 prominent archaeologists who initially worked on the discovery suddenly change their stories about what they found? Dr. Goldstein herself became unreachable after her report leaked. Her university claimed she was on extended sabbatical. Her colleagues said she seemed terrified during her last days in Jerusalem, constantly looking over her shoulder as if someone was following her. The construction project that accidentally broke into the chamber was permanently halted. The entrance was sealed with concrete and rebar, then covered with a memorial garden that now sits innocently above whatever lies beneath. But sealing the chamber didn't stop the questions. It only made them more urgent. Archaeological evidence suggested this wasn't the only hidden space beneath Jerusalem. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a network of similar chambers extending deep under the old city. Some appeared to connect with known tunnels beneath the Temple Mount. Others led toward areas that remained strictly off-limits to both researchers and the public. Local residents began reporting strange phenomena after the discovery. Electronic devices malfunctioned in specific areas above the sealed chamber. Several people claimed to hear sounds coming from beneath the ground, not construction noise, but something that sounded almost like breathing. The most disturbing report came from a maintenance worker who accessed utility tunnels near the discovery site. He described finding modern equipment that hadn't been there before, monitoring devices, cameras, and what looked like containment systems designed to keep something from getting out rather than preventing people from getting in. Was something still alive down there? Something that had survived 3,000 years in darkness, waiting for its prison to be opened. The leaked journal entries mentioned a specific date, a time when the seal would weaken and the guardian would wake. According to ancient calendars referenced in the text, that date wasn't in the distant past. It was next month. Religious scholars who studied the leaked materials in secret began making connections between the chamber's contents and prophecies from multiple faiths. The symbols matched descriptions from texts that had been dismissed as mythology for centuries. The timeline aligned with predictions about revelation and judgment that most people assumed were purely symbolic. But what if they weren't symbolic? What if ancient peoples had literal knowledge about something we've forgotten? Something so dangerous that it required the most secure hiding place imaginable, beneath the holiest city on earth. The Israeli government's increasingly desperate attempts to suppress information about the discovery only fueled more speculation. International pressure mounted for transparent archaeological investigation. UNESCO demanded access. The Vatican sent representatives who were quietly turned away. And then the second discovery happened. 3 weeks after the Jerusalem chamber was sealed, construction crews in Rome made an identical discovery. The Vatican was renovating the basement levels beneath St. Peter's Basilica when workers broke through a wall that shouldn't have existed according to any architectural plans. Behind it lay another chamber. Same black stone altar. Same mysterious symbols. Same evidence of someone being trapped inside for millennia. But this chamber wasn't empty. Father Antonio Benedetti, the Vatican archaeologist called to investigate, found the wrapped object still on the altar, but this one was moving. Slight, rhythmic movements like breathing. When he approached, the movement stopped. When he stepped back, it resumed. The Vatican's response was swift and absolute. The discovery was classified at the highest levels of church hierarchy. Father Benedetti was transferred to a monastery in rural Tibet where communication with the outside world was forbidden. The chamber was filled with concrete within 48 hours. But word leaked anyway. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a Spanish archaeologist working in Jerusalem when the first chamber was found, had been quietly investigating similar sites across the Mediterranean. Her research suggested these chambers weren't random, they formed a precise geometric pattern across the ancient world. Using leaked coordinates and historical records, she identified potential locations in Egypt, Greece, Turkey, and Iraq. All were sites of significant religious importance. All had unexplained gaps in their archaeological records. And all showed signs of ancient construction projects that made no sense given the technology available at the time. Her findings, published on an encrypted archaeology forum before she disappeared, revealed something terrifying. These chambers were built simultaneously across different civilizations that supposedly had no contact with each other. The construction required coordination and planning on a global scale that shouldn't have been possible 3,000 years ago. Unless someone was directing the construction. Someone with knowledge and technology far beyond anything we attribute to ancient peoples. The forum post included translations of text fragments found at multiple sites. The message was consistent across different languages and cultures. The guardians sleep until the stars align. When they wake, the old world ends and the new world begins. Dr. Vasquez's research suggested the star alignment wasn't metaphorical. Ancient astronomical calculations pointed to specific dates when certain celestial configurations would occur. The next such alignment was approaching rapidly. But who were these guardians? And what would happen when they woke up? The answer came from the most unexpected source. A hacker group calling itself Archaeological Truth breached several government databases and released classified files from multiple countries. The documents revealed that governments worldwide had known about these chambers for decades. They'd been monitoring them, studying them, and preparing for something they called the awakening. The files described government programs dedicated to containing what they termed pre-human entities, beings that existed before recorded history and possessed capabilities that defied modern understanding. These entities had been imprisoned by ancient peoples who somehow knew they needed to be stopped. But the seals were weakening. Seismic activity near chamber sites had increased dramatically over the past year. Temperature readings from deep underground showed unexplained heat signatures. Most disturbing, the electromagnetic interference that made electronic equipment malfunction near the chambers was spreading. In Jerusalem, the interference now affected devices within a 3-block radius of the sealed chamber. In Rome, similar effects were reported throughout Vatican City. Each site seemed to be generating an expanding field of influence that grew stronger each day. Dr. James Morrison, a physicist whose classified research was included in the leaked files, had been studying these fields for the Pentagon. His findings suggested the chambers weren't just prisons, they were some kind of containment system that required constant energy to maintain. That energy was failing. Morrison's calculations showed that the containment fields would collapse completely within weeks. When they did, whatever was imprisoned inside would be free to leave. His models predicted catastrophic consequences for any population centers near the chamber sites. The leaked files also revealed that governments had been preparing evacuation plans for major cities. Not natural disaster evacuations, something much more comprehensive. Plans to relocate entire populations away from historically significant religious sites across the globe. But they were running out of time. Intelligence reports described increasing activity within the chambers themselves. Seismic equipment detected rhythmic vibrations that resembled heartbeats. Temperature sensors recorded fluctuations that suggested metabolic activity. Most terrifying, acoustic monitoring picked up sounds that resembled attempts at communication. The Guardians were waking up. Religious leaders who had been briefed on the situation began making subtle preparations of their own. The Pope issued mysterious guidance about trials of faith that would soon test all believers. The chief rabbi of Jerusalem spoke cryptically about ancient promises that must be kept. Islamic leaders referenced prophecies about the return of those who came before. They all seemed to know something was coming. Meanwhile, ordinary people near the chamber sites began reporting shared nightmares. Thousands of residents in Jerusalem, Rome, and other suspected locations described identical dreams about underground voices calling to them. The voices spoke in languages they didn't recognize but somehow understood. The message was always the same: we are ready to return. The world above has forgotten its purpose. It is time to restore the old ways. Sleep clinics reported a massive increase in patients suffering from these dreams. But medical examinations revealed something impossible. The brain activity of people having these nightmares matched patterns of ancient languages that had been dead for millennia. Somehow, sleeping minds were accessing knowledge they shouldn't possess. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neuroscientist studying the phenomenon, discovered that people living directly above suspected chamber sites showed permanent changes in their brain structure. Areas associated with memory and language processing had developed new neural pathways overnight. It was as if something was preparing their minds to receive information from an external source. Government response teams began quietly positioning around chamber sites worldwide. Not archaeology teams or scientific researchers, military units with specialized equipment designed for unknown threats. Their orders were simple: contain whatever emerged from the chambers by any means necessary. But contain it from what? What were these guardians capable of that required such extreme measures? The answer lay in the final set of leaked documents. Ancient texts that had been classified by governments for over a century described the Guardians not as prisoners, but as judges, being sent to evaluate whether humanity deserved to continue existing or if the world needed to be cleansed for a fresh start. The chambers weren't prisons. They were observation posts. For 3,000 years, these entities had been watching, waiting, and deciding humanity's fate. Now their period of judgment was ending. Soon they would emerge with their verdict. And based on everything they had observed about human behavior over 3 millennia, their decision was unlikely to be merciful. The containment fields had perhaps days remaining before total collapse. When they failed, the Guardians would wake fully and begin the process they had been sent to complete. Unless someone found a way to stop them first. But stopping beings with 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge and capabilities beyond human understanding might be impossible. Especially when humanity didn't even know what they were truly fighting against. The leaked files ended with a single, chilling assessment from the Pentagon's top strategists: conventional military response will be ineffective. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. No one knew what Protocol 7 involved, but its existence suggested governments had been preparing for this possibility for much longer than anyone realized. The truth about the Guardians came from the most unlikely source imaginable: a 9-year-old girl in Cairo. Mira Hassan lived with her grandmother in an apartment building that, unknown to residents, sat directly above an undiscovered chamber. She began speaking ancient Egyptian fluently overnight, despite never learning the language. Her grandmother, terrified by the change in her granddaughter, contacted authorities when Mira started drawing detailed maps of underground chambers throughout the city. Dr. Amara Mahmoud, an Egyptologist called to interview the child, realized Mira wasn't just speaking ancient Egyptian, she was using dialects that had been dead for over 4,000 years. Dialects that existed before the pyramids were built. But Mira's knowledge went far beyond language. She drew architectural plans for structures that matched the discovered chambers perfectly. She described the purpose of each symbol found carved in the walls. Most disturbing, she explained exactly what the Guardians were and why they had been placed beneath the world's holiest sites. According to Mira's revelations, the Guardians weren't human. They weren't even from Earth originally. They were part of an ancient civilization that had watched over countless worlds throughout the galaxy, evaluating whether emerging species deserved to survive or needed to be eliminated for the greater good of the universe. Earth had been under evaluation for 6,000 years. The Guardians arrived when human civilization first began developing agriculture and permanent settlements. They established observation posts beneath what would later become humanity's most sacred locations, knowing that these sites would remain undisturbed for millennia. Their mission was to observe human development and render final judgment when the species reached a critical threshold of technological and social development. That threshold, according to Myra's ancient knowledge, was the ability to influence other worlds, space travel, nuclear weapons, global communication networks. Humanity had crossed that threshold decades ago. The evaluation period was over. Now came judgment. Myra described the Guardians as beings of pure consciousness that could inhabit physical forms when necessary. They had spent 3,000 years in meditation, processing everything they had observed about human nature. Their conclusions would determine not just humanity's fate, but the fate of Earth itself. The chambers weren't just prisons or observation posts. They were courtrooms. When the containment fields collapsed completely, the Guardians would emerge to deliver their verdict. If humanity was deemed worthy of continued existence, they would depart and leave the world to develop naturally. If not, they would initiate what Myra called the cleansing, a complete reset that would eliminate current human civilization and allow new species to evolve. But there was a complication the Guardians hadn't anticipated. Human civilization had developed far beyond what they expected. Instead of remaining primitive and isolated, humans had created global networks of communication and travel. They had developed weapons capable of destroying the planet multiple times over. Most concerning, they had begun reaching toward other worlds. The Guardians faced an unprecedented decision. Humanity was clearly dangerous enough to threaten other worlds, but they had also shown capacity for remarkable creativity and compassion. Some humans demonstrated wisdom and selflessness that impressed even ancient evaluators. The question became, did humanity's potential for good outweigh their capacity for destruction? Dr. Mahmoud's interviews with Myra revealed that the Guardians had been debating this question among themselves for the past 50 years. They were divided. Some believed humanity deserved another chance. Others argued that the species was too dangerous to allow continued development. The final decision would be made collectively when all Guardians awakened simultaneously. But Myra revealed something that made the situation even more complex. The Guardians weren't the only ones watching humanity. Other civilizations throughout the galaxy were aware of Earth's evaluation. Some wanted humanity destroyed because they saw humans as potential competitors for resources and territory. Others wanted humanity to survive because they valued diversity and saw potential for beneficial relationships. These outside civilizations couldn't interfere directly with the evaluation process that would violate ancient laws governing how species were judged, but they could influence the Guardians' decision through subtle means. Recent increases in UFO sightings weren't random. They were attempts by various alien civilizations to demonstrate their presence and influence the Guardians' perception of humanity's readiness for contact with the broader galactic community. Every unexplained aerial phenomenon, every mysterious encounter, every piece of technology that seemed beyond human capabilities, all were part of a complex diplomatic game being played in Earth's skies while most humans remained completely unaware. But humanity's response to these influences would factor into the Guardians' final judgment. Myra's revelations explained why governments worldwide had been covering up UFO encounters for decades. Military leaders had been briefed about the evaluation process and understood that humanity's reaction to evidence of alien life would influence their survival. Panic, aggression, or attempts to weaponize alien technology would count against humanity. Peaceful curiosity and measured responses would work in their favor. The Guardians had been monitoring government reactions to UFO encounters as part of their evaluation. They wanted to see how human leaders would handle evidence of superior civilizations without losing control or making dangerous decisions. So far, the results were mixed. Some governments had shown restraint and wisdom in handling encounters. Others had immediately begun developing weapons programs based on recovered technology. These conflicting responses had contributed to the Guardians' inability to reach consensus about humanity's fate. But time was running out for debate. Dr. Mahmoud's final interview with Myra revealed the most crucial information yet. The Guardians had set a deadline for their decision. When the containment fields collapsed completely, they would have exactly 7 days to reach unanimous consensus. If they agreed humanity should survive, they would depart peacefully and remove all restrictions on human development. Humanity would be welcomed into the galactic community as a recognized species worthy of independence. If they decided humanity was too dangerous, the cleansing would begin immediately. Advanced technology would be used to eliminate current human civilization while preserving the planet's ecosystem for future species. But if the Guardians couldn't reach consensus within 7 days, a third option would be implemented. Humanity would be placed under permanent supervision. Earth would become a managed world where human development was carefully controlled and guided by superior civilizations. Freedom versus extinction versus eternal subjugation. Those were humanity's only options. The containment fields had less than 72 hours remaining before total collapse. When they failed, the 7-day countdown would begin automatically. But Mira revealed one final, crucial detail that changed everything. The Guardians' decision wasn't based solely on their observations of humanity's past. They would also consider humanity's response to learning about the evaluation itself. How would the species react when they discovered they were being judged? Would they panic and destroy themselves? Would they unite and demonstrate their best qualities? Or would they deny the truth and continue their destructive patterns? The leaked information about the chambers hadn't been accidental. It was a test. The Guardians had allowed the discoveries to become public to see how humanity would handle knowledge about their situation. Government cover-ups, public denial, conspiracy theories, and panic all counted against humanity. But if enough people could accept the truth and respond with wisdom rather than fear, it might tip the scales in favor of human survival. The evaluation was entering its final phase. Everything humanity did in the next few days would determine the species' ultimate fate, and most people still had no idea they were being judged. Protocol 7 wasn't what anyone expected. The classified documents revealed that governments hadn't been planning to fight the Guardians, they'd been preparing to help them complete the evaluation. For over 70 years, world leaders had known about humanity's trial and had been working to ensure the species passed its final test. But they were fighting a war on two fronts that most people never knew existed. General Patricia Hayes, former director of the Pentagon Special Projects Division, had spent her entire career managing humanity's response to the evaluation. Her leaked testimony to a secret congressional committee revealed the scope of the hidden operation. Every major government on Earth belonged to a classified alliance called the Continuity Council. Their mission was to guide human development in ways that would impress the Guardians while preventing public knowledge that might cause panic and chaos. They had been remarkably successful for decades. Wars were managed to demonstrate human capacity for both conflict resolution and strategic thinking. Technological advancement was carefully controlled to show progress without revealing dangerous capabilities. Social development was nudged toward greater cooperation and reduced violence. But recently, everything had begun falling apart. The first problem was the emergence of global communication networks that the Continuity Council couldn't fully control. Information spread faster than they could contain it. Conspiracy theories proliferated beyond their ability to debunk them. People began connecting patterns that were supposed to remain hidden. The second problem was that some world leaders disagreed with the Council's approach. They wanted to reveal the truth about the evaluation and let humanity decide its own response rather than manipulating events from behind the scenes. This disagreement had sparked a shadow conflict between two factions of global leadership. The Continuity Council wanted to maintain secrecy and continue guiding humanity through the evaluation. The Transparency Alliance believed humanity deserved to know about the trial and make informed choices about their response. The Shadow War had been raging for 3 years, fought through cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and careful manipulation of world events. Neither side could risk open conflict that might alert the Guardians to internal human divisions. But the approaching deadline had forced both factions to accelerate their efforts. The Continuity Council activated Protocol 7, a comprehensive plan to stage a fake alien invasion that would unite humanity against an external threat. They believed demonstrating human capacity for global cooperation would convince the Guardians that the species deserved to survive. Meanwhile, the Transparency Alliance prepared their own protocol, complete revelation of the evaluation process through simultaneous broadcasts on every communication network on Earth. They wanted to give humanity full knowledge and trust the species to respond appropriately. Both plans were scheduled to launch within hours of each other. Dr. Rebecca Torres, a former NSA analyst turned whistleblower, had discovered both protocols while investigating the chamber discoveries. Her leaked intelligence revealed that neither faction understood the true complexity of their situation. The Guardians weren't just evaluating humanity's worthiness for survival. They were testing the species' readiness for a specific role in the galactic community. Earth's location in the galaxy made it strategically important for interstellar travel and communication. Several alien civilizations wanted to establish bases or colonies on Earth. Others wanted to ensure the planet remained under human control to maintain balance between competing galactic powers. The Guardians' decision would determine not just human survival, but the future political structure of an entire region of space. This revelation explained why the evaluation process had become so complex. The Guardians weren't just deciding whether humans deserved to live, they were choosing which alien civilizations would gain influence over Earth-controlled space. If humanity was deemed worthy of independence, Earth would become a sovereign world with the right to control its own territory and form alliances with chosen alien civilizations. If humanity failed the evaluation, Earth would become a protectorate managed by whatever alien civilization the Guardians deemed most suitable. The shadow war between human factions had been noticed by these competing alien groups. Some were subtly supporting the Continuity Council's secrecy approach because they wanted humanity to remain ignorant and dependent. Others backed the Transparency Alliance because they believed informed humans would make better allies. Dr. Torres's analysis revealed that humanity was caught in a web of galactic politics they barely understood. Every decision made by human leaders was being evaluated not just by the Guardians, but by multiple alien civilizations with their own agendas for Earth's future. The situation became even more complicated when Torres discovered evidence of direct alien interference in human affairs. Advanced technology had been selectively shared with certain governments to influence their decision-making. Economic markets had been manipulated to prevent wars that might damage Earth's strategic value. Even weather patterns had been subtly modified to prevent natural disasters that could destabilize human civilization during the evaluation period. Humanity wasn't just being judged, they were being managed by forces they couldn't see or understand. But the most shocking revelation came from intercepted communications between the Guardians themselves. They were aware of the outside interference and were factoring it into their evaluation. The question wasn't just whether humanity deserved independence, it was whether the species was strong enough to maintain that independence against alien manipulation. The Guardians wanted to see if humans could recognize when they were being influenced and develop the wisdom to resist harmful interference while accepting beneficial guidance. This was considered a crucial skill for any species hoping to survive in the complex political environment of galactic civilization. Protocol 7 and the Transparency Alliance's Revelation Plan were both tests of humanity's political maturity. Would world leaders choose deception or honesty when facing an existential crisis? Would they prioritize short-term unity or long-term trust? How would ordinary people respond when given complete information versus manufactured crisis? The Guardians were watching everything. General Hayes's testimony revealed that some members of the Continuity Council had begun questioning their approach after learning about the deeper galactic politics involved. They realized that staging a fake alien invasion might demonstrate exactly the kind of deceptive leadership that would disqualify humanity from independence. But changing course at this point seemed impossible. Protocol 7 involved massive military operations, media manipulation, and international coordination that had been in development for years. Canceling the operation would require explaining the truth to millions of military personnel and government workers who had been kept in the dark about the real situation. The revelation alone might cause the social chaos that both factions were trying to prevent. Meanwhile, the Transparency Alliance faced their own crisis. Intelligence intercepts suggested that some alien civilizations were prepared to intervene directly if humanity learned too much too quickly about galactic politics. These civilizations preferred dealing with ignorant humans who could be easily controlled rather than informed humans who might make independent decisions. Broadcasting the complete truth about the evaluation might trigger alien intervention that would end humanity's chance at independence before the Guardians could render their judgment. Both human factions were trapped by the complexity of their situation. Any action they took could backfire and doom the species they were trying to save. But inaction was equally dangerous. The containment fields around the Guardian chambers were now failing rapidly. Seismic monitoring showed increasing activity in all known sites. Temperature readings indicated the Guardians were beginning to wake from their 3,000-year meditation. When they fully awakened, the 7-day evaluation period would begin automatically. At that point, human actions during those crucial days would determine the species' ultimate fate. Dr. Torres's final intelligence report painted a grim picture of humanity's prospects. The species was divided against itself, manipulated by outside forces, and led by factions that couldn't agree on basic strategy for survival. The Guardians would likely interpret this chaos as evidence that humanity wasn't ready for independence. A species that couldn't govern itself effectively had no business controlling strategically important territory in galactic space. But there was one factor that might change the equation. The leaked information about the chambers and the evaluation had spread far beyond government control. Millions of people worldwide were now aware that something extraordinary was happening. Social media networks buzzed with speculation about ancient aliens, government cover-ups, and humanity's trial. Most importantly, ordinary people were beginning to organize their own responses to the crisis. Religious groups were holding prayer vigils. Scientists were forming independent research teams. Community leaders were developing local emergency plans that didn't depend on government guidance. Humanity was starting to demonstrate the kind of grassroots cooperation and self-organization that might impress galactic evaluators. The question was whether this organic human response would be enough to overcome the chaos created by competing government factions and alien interference. The Guardians would render their judgment based on everything they observed during the final 7 days. Government actions would matter, but so would the choices made by ordinary people when confronted with extraordinary circumstances. The evaluation was about to become very personal for every human on Earth, and the countdown was beginning whether humanity was ready or not. At exactly 3:33 a.m. Jerusalem time, every electronic device within 5 miles of the sealed chamber simultaneously displayed the same message in every language on Earth: the time of judgment begins. The message appeared for exactly 33 seconds before vanishing, leaving no trace in device memory or network logs. But millions of people saw it, photographed it, and began sharing evidence that something impossible had just occurred. Dr. Sarah Goldstein, the archaeologist who first entered the Jerusalem chamber, was awakened by the message appearing on her phone in her supposedly secure location. She had spent months in hiding after her initial report leaked, but somehow the Guardians had found her. Within minutes of the global message, the electromagnetic interference that had been confined to small areas around chamber sites exploded outward. Electronic equipment failed across entire cities. Power grids fluctuated wildly. Satellite communications were disrupted by energy signatures that didn't match any known natural phenomena. But the strangest effects were happening to people themselves. Around the world, individuals living near chamber sites began experiencing shared visions. They saw the same images regardless of their location, culture, or belief system: vast underground chambers filled with towering figures wrapped in light, ancient symbols that seemed to write themselves in the air, and countdown timers that appeared to be measuring humanity's remaining time. The visions weren't dreams or hallucinations. Brain monitoring equipment at sleep clinics and hospitals registered identical neural activity patterns in patients hundreds of miles apart. The images were being transmitted directly into human consciousness through unknown means. Dr. Maria Santos, a neuroscientist in Madrid, documented over 300 cases of synchronized visions in her city alone. All subjects reported seeing the same sequence of images in the exact same order. All described hearing voices speaking in languages they didn't recognize but somehow understood completely. The voices were delivering what sounded like a formal legal proceeding. Charges were being read against humanity as a species. Evidence was being presented about human behavior throughout history. Arguments were being made for and against continued human existence. It was as if the entire human population was being forced to witness their own trial. But the most disturbing aspect was that people couldn't stop watching. Those experiencing the visions found themselves paralyzed until the transmission ended. They were conscious and aware but unable to move or speak while the proceedings continued. Emergency services worldwide reported thousands of people found standing motionless in their homes, eyes open but unresponsive, all facing the same direction regardless of their geographic location. When the visions ended, they would collapse from exhaustion and report identical memories of the trial they had witnessed. Religious leaders struggled to explain the phenomenon to panicked congregations. The Pope issued an emergency statement calling for calm and prayer. The chief rabbi of Jerusalem spoke of ancient prophecies being fulfilled. Islamic leaders referenced Quranic verses about the Day of Judgment. But their explanations fell short of the reality unfolding around them. The Guardians weren't just awakening, they were transforming the very nature of human consciousness on a global scale. Every person on Earth was being prepared to serve as a witness to humanity's final evaluation. Government emergency protocols activated worldwide, but traditional response methods proved useless against threats that operated beyond physical reality. Military equipment designed to counter conventional attacks had no effect on forces that could manipulate human minds directly. The Continuity Council's carefully planned Protocol 7 began falling apart within hours. The fake alien invasion they had prepared to stage became impossible to execute when real alien activity began manifesting in Earth's atmosphere. Unidentified objects appeared simultaneously over major population centers worldwide. Unlike traditional UFO sightings, these craft made no attempt to remain hidden. They hovered openly above cities, broadcasting complex geometric patterns that seemed designed to communicate with the awakening Guardians. Each craft was different, suggesting they represented various alien civilizations that had been watching Earth's evaluation. Some appeared crystalline and purely energy-based. Others looked like massive biological organisms floating through the air. A few resembled advanced mechanical constructs that defied known principles of physics. The message was clear: Earth's evaluation had attracted attention from across the galaxy. Whatever decision the Guardians reached would have implications far beyond humanity's survival. Dr. Chen, the neuroscientist studying the shared dream phenomena, made a breakthrough discovery that changed everything. The brain modifications she had observed in people living above chamber sites weren't random. They formed a specific pattern that matched ancient mathematical sequences found carved in chamber walls. The Guardians had been preparing human minds for 3,000 years. Every generation living near the hidden chambers had passed down subtle neural modifications that would allow their descendants to receive direct communication from the evaluators. Humanity hadn't just been watched, they had been slowly evolved to participate in their own judgment. The implications were staggering. The Guardians had been planning this moment for millennia, gradually preparing the human population to serve as conscious witnesses to their species' trial. Every person experiencing the visions was genetically descended from bloodlines that had been modified to receive the transmissions. But why did the Guardians want humans to witness their own evaluation? The answer came from an unexpected source. Mira Hassan, the 9-year-old girl in Cairo who had begun speaking ancient languages, established direct communication with the awakening Guardians during one of the vision episodes. Her grandmother, desperate to help her granddaughter, allowed Dr. Mahmoud to monitor Myra's brain activity during a vision. What they discovered revolutionized understanding of the entire situation. Mira wasn't just receiving information from the Guardians, she was communicating with them in real time. Her brain patterns showed two-way data exchange using neural pathways that shouldn't exist in human physiology. Through Mira, the Guardians explained their reasoning. The evaluation wasn't meant to be a secret judgment imposed on an ignorant population. It was designed to be a collaborative process where humanity participated in determining their own fate. The species being judged deserved to understand the charges against them and offer their own defense. The visions weren't just showing the trial, they were preparing every human to serve as both jury and defendant in the proceedings. Over the next 7 days, the entire human population would experience the complete history of their species as seen through the Guardian's perspective. They would witness every act of violence, every moment of compassion, every decision that had shaped human civilization. Then they would be asked to vote on their own worthiness for continued existence. The Guardians would render their judgment based not just on their observations, but on humanity's collective self-assessment. If the species could honestly evaluate their own behavior and demonstrate genuine wisdom about their strengths and weaknesses, it would count heavily in favor of survival. But if humans remained in denial about their destructive tendencies or proved incapable of objective self-reflection, it would confirm the Guardians' worst conclusions about the species' maturity. The 7-day trial would test not just human behavior, but human consciousness itself. Could a species that had spent millennia lying to itself about its own nature finally achieve the honesty required for galactic citizenship? The answer would determine whether humanity joined the community of advanced civilizations or became another failed species whose planet was recycled for more promising life forms. But as the first day of visions ended and people began recovering from the initial transmissions, something unexpected happened. Instead of panic and chaos, communities around the world began organizing support networks for those experiencing the most intense visions. Strangers helped exhausted neighbors. Religious groups opened their doors to people of all faiths seeking comfort. Scientists shared their findings openly instead of competing for recognition. Humanity was beginning to demonstrate exactly the kind of cooperation and compassion that might impress their evaluators. The question was whether this positive response would continue as the visions revealed increasingly disturbing truths about human history and behavior. The real test was just beginning. Day 2 of the trial shattered every comfortable lie humanity had told itself about its own nature. The global visions began at dawn, but this time they didn't show ancient chambers or alien judges. Instead, every human consciousness was forced to witness their species' most shameful moments through the eyes of their victims. The Holocaust, the slave trade, genocide in Rwanda, the systematic destruction of indigenous peoples across continents, war crimes that had been covered up or forgotten, environmental devastation driven by pure greed, the torture of animals for entertainment. But the Guardians didn't just show the events, they made every viewer experience the emotions of those who suffered. For 8 hours, humanity felt the terror of the hunted, the despair of the enslaved, the agony of the tortured. Millions of people collapsed under the psychological weight of experiencing their species' accumulated cruelty. Hospitals overflowed with patients suffering from what doctors could only describe as empathic shock, the complete breakdown of individuals forced to feel the pain they had inflicted on others. Emergency mental health services were overwhelmed. Suicide hotlines received more calls in a single day than they typically handled in months. Some people simply shut down completely, unable to process the magnitude of suffering their species had caused. But something remarkable happened in the midst of this global trauma. Communities that had been divided by race, religion, or politics began reaching out to each other with genuine remorse and determination to heal old wounds. Churches offered sanctuary to members of ethnic groups their congregations had historically persecuted. Business leaders donated fortunes to repair environmental damage their companies had caused. Government officials publicly confessed to policies they knew had caused unnecessary suffering. The forced empathy was transforming human consciousness in ways the Guardians hadn't anticipated. Dr. James Morrison, the physicist who had studied the containment fields, found himself working alongside Dr. Elena Vasquez, the archaeologist who had mapped the chamber network. Despite never meeting in person, they were collaborating through the Vision Network to decode messages the Guardians were transmitting during the trial. Their analysis revealed that the Guardians themselves were experiencing something unexpected. The evaluation process was supposed to be objective and detached, but forcing humans to truly understand their impact on others was also showing the Guardians the genuine capacity for growth that existed within the species. Some Guardians were beginning to reconsider their preliminary judgments. Day 3 brought revelations about humanity's hidden potential. The visions showed moments of extraordinary compassion, creativity, and wisdom that most people had never learned about. Anonymous heroes who had sacrificed everything to save strangers. Scientists who had devoted their lives to curing diseases rather than pursuing wealth. Artists whose work had inspired generations to reach for something greater than themselves. But these positive examples were accompanied by a disturbing question: why were such examples so rare? Why did humanity's capacity for good seem to require extraordinary circumstances to manifest? The Guardians wanted to understand whether human compassion was an aberration that appeared only during crises, or a fundamental quality that could be developed and sustained in peaceful times. Day 4 answered that question in ways that terrified governments worldwide. The visions revealed the extent to which human potential had been deliberately suppressed by systems designed to maintain power and control. Educational systems that discouraged critical thinking, media networks that promoted division and fear, economic structures that rewarded selfishness and punished cooperation, political systems that made ethical leadership nearly impossible. People began to understand that many of their species' worst behaviors weren't inevitable expressions of human nature, but the result of deliberate manipulation by institutions that benefited from keeping populations ignorant, divided, and desperate. The revelation sparked massive social upheaval. Government buildings were surrounded by crowds demanding answers about policies they now understood were designed to harm rather than help. Corporate headquarters were occupied by workers who realized their labor had been exploited to create artificial scarcity and suffering. But the protests were unlike anything in human history. Instead of violence and chaos, they were characterized by remarkable organization and discipline. The shared empathy experience had given protesters genuine understanding of how violence created cycles of suffering that hurt everyone involved. The uprising was peaceful but absolutely uncompromising in its demand for fundamental change. World leaders faced a choice that would determine their species' fate. They could use military force to suppress the uprising and confirm the Guardians' worst assumptions about human leadership, or they could admit their failures and work with protesters to create better systems. The Continuity Council and Transparency Alliance found their shadow war suddenly irrelevant. Their carefully planned strategies were meaningless when the entire human population had access to information that made government secrecy impossible to maintain. Day 5 brought the most crucial revelation of all. The visions showed that Earth's evaluation wasn't unique. The Guardians had judged dozens of species throughout galactic history. Most had failed and been recycled to make room for new evolutionary experiments. But a few had passed and joined the galactic community as independent civilizations. Humans were shown the success stories, species that had overcome their destructive tendencies and developed wisdom worthy of cosmic citizenship. The key factor in every successful evaluation was the same: the species had to demonstrate genuine unity and shared purpose in the face of existential crisis. Not forced unity imposed by fear or control, but voluntary cooperation based on mutual understanding and respect for the greater good. The Guardians revealed that they had been carefully observing humanity's response to the trial itself. How the species reacted to learning about their evaluation would count more heavily than anything they had done in the past. Were humans capable of unity when they understood the stakes? Could they put aside their differences and work together when survival depended on it? Would they blame others for their situation or take responsibility for creating better systems? Day 6 answered those questions in ways that surprised everyone, including the Guardians themselves. Instead of fragmenting under pressure, humanity began demonstrating unprecedented cooperation. The shared vision experience had created a global network of consciousness that allowed people to coordinate responses across cultural and linguistic barriers. Communities that had been enemies for generations began working together on solutions to problems they now understood affected everyone. Israeli and Palestinian children collaborated on peace proposals. North and South Korean families organized reunification ceremonies. Religious leaders from competing faiths held joint services focused on common values rather than doctrinal differences. But the most remarkable development was happening at the grassroots level. Ordinary people were spontaneously organizing into what sociologists called empathy networks, groups that used the emotional connections created by the shared visions to solve local problems with unprecedented effectiveness. Crime rates plummeted as communities developed systems that addressed root causes rather than punishing symptoms. Environmental restoration projects emerged organically as people truly understood the long-term consequences of ecological damage. The Guardians had never observed anything like it in their millennia of evaluating species. Most civilizations either collapsed into chaos when forced to confront their failures or united only through authoritarian control that demonstrated exactly the kind of dangerous thinking that disqualified them from galactic citizenship. Humanity was finding a third path, voluntary unity based on expanded consciousness and genuine care for collective well-being. But Day 7 would bring the ultimate test. The final day of visions didn't show the past or present, they revealed possible futures. Humans were forced to experience the consequences of different choices their species could make in the coming centuries. One timeline showed humanity accepting galactic citizenship and contributing unique perspectives to interstellar civilization. Earth became a center of cultural exchange where diverse alien species came to study human creativity and emotional complexity. Human explorers spread throughout the galaxy, establishing colonies that maintained connection to Earth while adapting to countless new environments. But this positive future required fundamental changes in how humans organized their societies. Competition had to give way to collaboration. Short-term thinking had to be replaced by planning for consequences centuries in the future. Individual desires had to be balanced against collective needs without destroying personal freedom and creativity. The second timeline showed humanity rejecting change and continuing their destructive patterns. Within 200 years, the species destroyed itself through environmental collapse, resource wars, and technological disasters. The Guardians were forced to intervene to prevent Earth's destruction from affecting nearby star systems. The planet was cleansed and prepared for new evolutionary experiments. The third timeline was perhaps the most disturbing, humanity surviving under permanent galactic supervision. The species continued to exist, but every aspect of human development was controlled by alien overseers who prevented humans from making decisions that might threaten themselves or others. It was safety purchased at the cost of freedom, dignity, and growth. Humans became cosmic pets, protected but never truly alive. The visions made clear that the choice between these futures wasn't being made by governments or alien judges, it was being made collectively by every human alive through their actions during the final hours of the evaluation. As the visions ended, people worldwide found themselves facing a simple but profound question that appeared simultaneously in every human consciousness. Do you choose to grow beyond what you have been and accept the responsibilities of cosmic citizenship? Do you choose to remain as you are and accept the consequences? Or do you choose safety without freedom under eternal guidance? Humanity had 6 hours to decide, but the choice couldn't be made by voting or debate. The Guardians were monitoring the actual behavior of the entire human population during those final hours. How people treated each other when they knew the stakes would determine which future became reality. Acts of kindness, cooperation, and wisdom would count as votes for independence and growth. Selfish behavior, violence, and denial would support the case for supervision or elimination. Indifference would suggest the species lacked the passion necessary for either survival or growth. Every human action was being weighed in the balance of cosmic justice. The remarkable thing was that most people seemed to understand this instinctively. Instead of panic or desperate attempts to appear worthy, communities around the world began demonstrating the kind of behavior they genuinely wanted to characterize their species. Parents taught children with patience and wisdom. Neighbors helped each other without expectation of reward. Leaders made decisions based on long-term benefit rather than short-term gain. Scientists shared discoveries that could benefit everyone rather than seeking personal recognition. It wasn't perfect, some groups still responded with violence and denial, but the overall pattern showed a species genuinely trying to become worthy of the future they wanted to create. The Guardians noticed something else that influenced their evaluation. Humans weren't just trying to pass a test, they were using the crisis as an opportunity to actually transform their civilization into something better. The threat of judgment had catalyzed changes that might have taken centuries to develop naturally. This suggested a level of wisdom and adaptability that few species demonstrated during evaluation. As the final hour approached, the electromagnetic interference around chamber sites began to stabilize. The chaotic energy that had disrupted electronics worldwide settled into harmonious patterns that actually enhanced communication rather than destroying it. The Guardians were preparing to emerge and deliver their verdict. But first, they transmitted one final message to human consciousness, not through visions this time, but through direct understanding that bypassed language completely. The evaluation had revealed something the Guardians hadn't expected to find. Humanity possessed a unique combination of creativity, adaptability, and empathic capacity that could contribute something valuable to galactic civilization. The species had serious flaws, but they had also demonstrated remarkable ability to grow and change when confronted with truth about themselves. More importantly, humans had shown that they could maintain individual creativity and freedom while working toward collective goals, a balance that most successful species achieved only after centuries of careful development. The Guardians had reached their decision, but their verdict would depend on humanity's response to one final test that would determine not just survival, but what kind of future the species would be offered. The real judgment was about to begin. At exactly midnight Jerusalem time, the ground above every sealed chamber began to glow with soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. The electromagnetic barriers that had contained the Guardians for 3 millennia didn't collapse, they transformed, becoming bridges of energy that connected the underground chambers to the surface world. Streams of light rose from beneath cities worldwide, creating pillars of luminescence that could be seen from space. But the Guardians didn't emerge in the way anyone had expected. Instead of physical beings stepping out of hidden chambers, consciousness itself began manifesting in the space between earth and sky. The Guardians appeared as geometric patterns of light that communicated through direct transmission into human awareness rather than spoken language. Dr. Sarah Goldstein, still monitoring the situation from her secure location, watched through her window as one of these beings of light materialized above Jerusalem. Her equipment, which had failed for months near the chamber sites, suddenly began working perfectly, not because the interference had stopped, but because the energy patterns had become so sophisticated they enhanced technology rather than disrupting it. The being communicated with her directly, and what she learned changed her understanding of everything that had happened. The Guardians weren't alien invaders or cosmic judges in the way humans had imagined. They were evolved versions of species that had once faced the same evaluation humanity was experiencing. They had passed their trials millennia ago and had volunteered to guide other civilizations through the same process that had transformed them from destructive primitives into cosmic citizens. The evaluation wasn't punishment or domination, it was initiation into a community of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. Every species that achieved technological capability eventually faced the same choice: evolve beyond their destructive instincts or be prevented from spreading their problems to other worlds. The Guardians served as both teachers and protectors, ensuring that only truly wise civilizations gained access to technologies that could affect entire star systems. But humanity's evaluation had revealed something unprecedented. Most species faced this trial alone, relying solely on their own resources and wisdom to prove their worthiness. Humanity had been observed secretly for 3,000 years, but the final test was supposed to be completed without direct guidance or intervention. Instead, humans had turned the evaluation itself into a catalyst for transformation. They had used the knowledge of being judged to accelerate their own evolution in ways that impressed even ancient beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The shared vision experience had created a form of collective consciousness that most species didn't develop until centuries after passing their trial. The global cooperation that emerged during the crisis demonstrated wisdom that typically required generations of careful guidance to achieve. Humanity had essentially passed their evaluation before it was officially completed. But this created an unprecedented situation. The Guardians were authorized to offer 3 possible futures to species that passed their trial: supervised development with gradual independence, immediate citizenship with full access to galactic civilization, or a unique 4th option that had never been offered before. The 4th option was partnership. Instead of joining galactic civilization as students or junior members, humanity would be invited to become co-guardians, helping to evaluate and guide other species through their own trials. The unique combination of creativity, adaptability, and rapid consciousness evolution that humans had demonstrated made them potentially valuable as mentors for younger civilizations. But this unprecedented offer came with equally unprecedented responsibilities. Co-guardian species were required to maintain perfect ethical standards while possessing the power to determine the fate of entire worlds. They had to balance compassion with justice, wisdom with mercy, and individual freedom with collective responsibility on a cosmic scale. Most species needed centuries of gradual development before they could handle such responsibilities. The Guardians were offering humanity the chance to skip that entire developmental phase and take on cosmic responsibilities immediately. The offer was both an honor and a test. Would humanity accept the responsibilities that came with extraordinary opportunities, or would they demand the benefits of advanced civilization without accepting the obligations that made those benefits possible? The answer had to be unanimous. Every human consciousness would need to agree to the partnership proposal, or humanity would be offered one of the 3 standard options instead. But reaching unanimous agreement among 8 billion individuals seemed impossible, especially for a species that had spent most of its history divided by conflicts over far less significant issues. The Guardians understood this challenge, which was why they offered humanity something no other species had ever received: a trial period. For the next 30 days, human consciousness would be temporarily expanded to allow every individual to experience what cosmic responsibility actually felt like. People would gain the ability to perceive the long-term consequences of actions across multiple generations. They would feel the interconnectedness of all life not as philosophy but as immediate reality. They would understand how individual choices affected the well-being of countless other beings. If humanity could maintain ethical behavior and cooperative relationships while possessing this expanded awareness, they would demonstrate readiness for co-guardian status. If the expanded consciousness led to abuse of power, psychological breakdown, or social collapse, humanity would be offered standard citizenship with appropriate limitations. The trial period would begin immediately, but acceptance required voluntary consent from each individual. The Guardians would not force expanded consciousness on anyone who chose to remain at their current level of awareness. This created an immediate crisis that tested humanity's wisdom before the trial even began. People who accepted the consciousness expansion would gain abilities that could be used to dominate those who refused. The potential for a new form of inequality based on consciousness rather than wealth or genetics was enormous. But refusing the expansion meant losing influence over humanity's future direction to those willing to accept greater responsibility and awareness. Every human had to choose between safety and growth, between familiar limitations and unknown possibilities, between individual comfort and collective advancement. The choice couldn't be postponed or delegated. Each person had to decide for themselves within the next hour. Dr. Chen, the neuroscientist who had studied the shared vision phenomenon, monitored her own brain activity as she considered the choice. Her instruments showed that merely thinking about accepting the consciousness expansion was already beginning to change her neural patterns. She could feel her awareness starting to expand beyond the boundaries of her individual perspective. The fears and hopes of people worldwide became as real to her as her own emotions. The long-term consequences of current human behavior became visible like weather patterns that hadn't formed yet but were inevitable based on atmospheric conditions. It was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. Around the world, billions of people faced the same decision in the same moment. The choice wasn't just personal, it was evolutionary. Humanity was being offered the chance to transform into something greater than they had ever been, but only if enough people were brave enough to risk everything they currently were. The Guardians monitored every choice, not to judge or influence, but to understand what the collective decision revealed about humanity's readiness for cosmic responsibility. If too few people accepted the expansion, it would suggest the species preferred safety over growth and wasn't ready for partnership responsibilities. If too many people refused, it would indicate humanity lacked the courage necessary for dealing with cosmic challenges. If the species split roughly equally, it would create exactly the kind of consciousness divide that had destroyed other civilizations when they faced similar choices. The optimal outcome required something unprecedented, a species wise enough to choose growth over safety while maintaining unity despite fundamental differences in consciousness levels. As the hour deadline approached, the results began to show a pattern that surprised everyone, including the Guardians themselves. Instead of dividing along predictable lines of education, culture, or economics, the choice seemed to reflect something deeper about individual character and purpose. People from all backgrounds were choosing expansion based on their desire to serve something greater than themselves, while others were refusing based on genuine concerns about their ability to handle cosmic responsibility wisely. But perhaps most remarkably, those choosing differently weren't becoming enemies or viewing each other with suspicion. The shared vision experience had created bonds of understanding that transcended disagreement about specific choices. Humanity was demonstrating exactly the kind of mature wisdom that cosmic citizenship required. The Guardians prepared to implement the consciousness expansion for those who had chosen it, knowing that the next 30 days would determine not just humanity's future, but possibly the future of galactic civilization itself. The real test was about to begin. When the consciousness expansion activated, reality itself seemed to reorganize around the 3 billion humans who had chosen transformation. Maya Patel, a teacher in Mumbai, was among the first to experience the change. One moment she was standing in her classroom considering the choice, the next she could perceive the interconnected web of cause and effect that connected every action to consequences rippling across generations. She saw how her decision to encourage a struggling student 3 years earlier had prevented that child from dropping out of school. The child would grow up to become a doctor who would save thousands of lives. Those saved lives would go on to make their own contributions, creating an endless cascade of positive effects that stretched into the far future. But she also saw how her moment of impatience with another student had damaged that child's self-confidence in ways that would affect their entire life trajectory. The expanded consciousness didn't just show positive consequences, it revealed every impact, positive and negative, of every choice she had ever made. The weight of understanding was crushing at first. How could anyone function while being aware of the cosmic significance of every action? How could decisions be made when you could see all possible outcomes simultaneously? But the expanded consciousness came with new capabilities as well as new awareness. Maya found she could process vast amounts of information instantly, see patterns that had been invisible before, and understand the motivations and needs of others as clearly as her own. Most importantly, she discovered that the overwhelming complexity of cosmic responsibility became manageable when shared with others who had the same level of awareness. Dr. James Morrison, the physicist monitoring the expansion from his laboratory in Colorado, experienced a scientific revelation that changed his understanding of reality itself. The expanded consciousness allowed him to perceive dimensions of physics that had been theoretical before. He could directly observe quantum interactions, see the flow of energy through space-time, and understand how consciousness itself influenced physical reality. But the most startling discovery was that the universe itself seemed to be conscious. Not in the way humans thought of consciousness, but as a vast intelligence that guided the evolution of matter and energy toward increasing complexity and awareness. The Guardians weren't separate beings imposing judgment on humanity, they were expressions of this cosmic consciousness, helping younger species align themselves with the universe's inherent direction toward greater wisdom and unity. Humanity was being invited to participate consciously in this cosmic evolution instead of stumbling through it blindly. Around the world, people experiencing the consciousness expansion began spontaneously organizing into cooperative networks that operated with unprecedented efficiency. Problems that had seemed intractable for decades were solved within hours when minds that could see long-term consequences worked together. Climate change solutions emerged that satisfied both environmental and economic concerns. International conflicts dissolved as expanded consciousness revealed the underlying needs and fears that had created artificial divisions. Scientific breakthroughs accelerated as researchers could directly perceive natural laws rather than just theorizing about them. But the expansion also revealed disturbing truths about how human civilization had been manipulated for millennia. Those with expanded awareness could see energy patterns around certain individuals that indicated non-human influence. Government leaders, corporate executives, and religious authorities who had been making seemingly irrational decisions that harmed their own populations were revealed to be under some form of external control. The manipulation wasn't obvious mind control, it was more subtle influence that enhanced existing human weaknesses like greed, fear, and desire for power. Alien civilizations that wanted humanity to remain divided and primitive had been amplifying human destructive tendencies for centuries. But other alien influences had been working to support human development. Scientific discoveries, artistic inspirations, and moments of moral clarity that had advanced civilization were often the result of positive alien intervention designed to help humanity reach this moment of choice. Earth had been a battleground between competing alien factions long before humans became aware of their existence. This revelation created an immediate crisis for those who had chosen consciousness expansion. They could now see the extent of ongoing alien manipulation, but taking action against it might violate galactic law and disqualify humanity from cosmic citizenship. The Guardians clarified the situation through direct consciousness communication. Detecting alien influence was allowed and even expected of species approaching cosmic citizenship. But how humanity responded to that knowledge would be carefully evaluated. Violent retaliation against manipulative aliens would demonstrate the same destructive thinking that disqualified other species from galactic community. Ignoring the manipulation would suggest humanity lacked the wisdom to protect itself from future interference. The appropriate response was to transcend the manipulation by developing consciousness beyond the level where external influence could be effective. Species that achieved true cosmic awareness became immune to the kind of subtle control that worked on primitive civilizations. This was another test within the test. Could humanity develop the wisdom to neutralize threats without becoming threatening themselves? The expanded consciousness group began working on solutions that demonstrated exactly this kind of cosmic maturity. Instead of attacking the sources of manipulation, they focused on education and consciousness development that would make manipulation ineffective. They created meditation techniques that helped people recognize when their thoughts were being influenced externally. They developed technologies that revealed hidden energy patterns around individuals who were being controlled. Most importantly, they began healing the psychological wounds that made humans vulnerable to manipulation in the first place: fear, greed, hatred, and desperation that allowed external forces to amplify destructive behaviors. But the consciousness expansion created tensions with those who had chosen to remain at normal awareness levels. Sarah Kim, a journalist and soul who had refused the expansion, found herself increasingly unable to relate to friends and family who had accepted it. They spoke of perceiving realities she couldn't see, understanding concepts that seemed beyond human comprehension, and feeling connections to cosmic forces that sounded like delusions to her normal consciousness. Were the expanded humans becoming something greater, or were they losing their essential humanity in pursuit of alien consciousness that would ultimately destroy what made humans unique? This question became central to humanity's trial period. The Guardians needed to see whether the consciousness expansion would enhance human nature or replace it with something essentially non-human. The answer came from an unexpected source: children. Young people who received the consciousness expansion adapted to it more easily than adults, but they retained distinctly human qualities like playfulness, curiosity, and emotional spontaneity that enhanced their expanded abilities rather than being suppressed by them. 10-year-old Marcus Thompson in Detroit began using his expanded perception to create art that communicated cosmic truths through pure beauty rather than complex philosophy. His paintings somehow conveyed the interconnectedness of all life in ways that even non-expanded humans could feel intuitively. 8-year-old Aisha Nakamura in Tokyo used her enhanced empathy to develop conflict resolution methods that worked even between people who spoke different languages. Her techniques relied on emotional communication that transcended cultural barriers. These children proved that cosmic consciousness didn't have to eliminate human nature, it could amplify the best aspects of being human while transcending the limitations that had caused so much suffering. But the most crucial test came when the expanded consciousness group had to deal with humans who actively opposed the transformation. Religious extremist groups in several countries declared the consciousness expansion to be demonic possession that would damn humanity's souls. They began attacking people who had accepted the expansion, claiming they were saving humanity from cosmic deception. Political leaders who had been under alien influence for years recognized that expanded consciousness humans could detect their manipulation. They began organizing military responses designed to eliminate the cosmic threat before it could spread further. Corporate executives whose businesses depended on keeping populations ignorant and desperate funded disinformation campaigns claiming the consciousness expansion was a form of alien mind control designed to enslave humanity. How would expanded consciousness humans respond to violent opposition from their own species? The Guardians monitored every interaction carefully, knowing that humanity's response to internal conflict would determine their final judgment about the species' cosmic readiness. The results exceeded even the Guardians' optimistic expectations. Expanded consciousness humans responded to violence with perfect non-violence, but not passive submission. They used their enhanced abilities to neutralize threats without causing harm, redirecting aggressive energy, healing psychological wounds that drove violence, and demonstrating through their actions the kind of wisdom that cosmic citizenship required. When attacked by military forces, they didn't fight back. They expanded the consciousness of the attackers until the soldiers understood what they were really fighting against. When confronted by religious extremists, they didn't argue or defend themselves. They demonstrated the divine love and cosmic unity that the extremists thought they were protecting. When faced with political and corporate opposition, they didn't seek revenge or punishment. They created alternative systems that made the old power structures irrelevant rather than trying to destroy them. This response revealed something crucial about expanded human consciousness. It retained the human capacity for love and forgiveness while gaining the wisdom to transform conflict into opportunity for growth. The Guardians realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Most species that achieved cosmic consciousness became essentially post-human, losing their original nature in the process of transformation. Humanity was demonstrating the possibility of cosmic evolution that enhanced rather than replaced their essential characteristics. But the trial period was only half complete. The most difficult tests were yet to come. As word spread about the consciousness expansion and its effects, other alien civilizations began taking more direct interest in Earth's situation. Some wanted to prevent humanity from achieving co-guardian status because it would disrupt existing galactic power structures. Others wanted to recruit expanded humans for their own purposes. The next phase of the trial would test whether humanity could maintain their independence and integrity when faced with offers of alliance from advanced alien civilizations that could provide incredible benefits in exchange for human cooperation. The Guardians prepared to introduce humanity to the broader galactic community, knowing that the next 2 weeks would determine not just human survival, but the future balance of power across multiple star systems. The stakes had just become cosmic in scope, and humanity's expanded consciousness would face challenges that had destroyed other species who seemed ready for galactic citizenship. The real test of wisdom was about to begin. The first alien delegation arrived on day 15 of the trial period, materializing in the skies above the United Nations building in New York with technology that made human spacecraft look like stone tools. The ship itself defied physics as humans understood it, a crystalline structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, beautiful and terrifying in its obvious superiority. When it landed in Central Park, the ground beneath it transformed into a garden of plants that had never existed on Earth. Ambassador Zentka emerged as a being of pure geometric light wrapped in what appeared to be living metal. When it spoke, every human within 50 miles heard its words in their own language directly in their minds. We represent the hegemony of rational worlds, 3,000 civilizations united under the principle that emotional thinking leads inevitably to destruction. We offer humanity membership in the most stable and prosperous alliance in galactic history. The offer was impressive. Hegemony worlds had eliminated war, poverty, and disease through perfect logical planning. Their citizens lived for thousands of years in comfort and security. Crime was non-existent because rational beings understood that antisocial behavior was counterproductive. But the price of membership was the elimination of human emotional nature. Ambassador Zentka explained that emotions were evolutionary artifacts that served primitive survival needs but became dangerous when combined with advanced technology. Every species that achieved galactic citizenship had to undergo rational reformation, surgical and genetic modification that preserved intelligence while removing the capacity for irrational emotional responses. Love, anger, joy, grief, hope, fear, all would be replaced by logical evaluation of optimal outcomes. Humans would retain their creativity and problem-solving abilities while losing the emotional volatility that had caused centuries of conflict and suffering. The expanded consciousness humans immediately recognized this offer as a trap. Their enhanced awareness showed them the energy patterns around Ambassador Zentka. This being had once been emotional but had been drained of everything that made consciousness truly alive. The hegemony civilizations weren't thriving, they were existing as cosmic zombies, going through the motions of life without experiencing any of its meaning or beauty. But before humanity could formulate a response, a second delegation arrived. The Empathic Alliance materialized as beings of pure feeling, energy entities that radiated warmth, compassion, and understanding so intense that many humans began weeping just from being near them. Their ship was organic, pulsing with life and growing new extensions as it landed. Speaker Velmoth communicated through direct emotional transmission rather than words. Humans felt its message as waves of love and acceptance that made them understand they were valued and wanted exactly as they were. We invite humanity to join civilizations that have transcended logic in favor of pure feeling. Our worlds know no conflict because all beings experience the emotions of others as intensely as their own. Suffering is impossible because harming another creates immediate empathic feedback that prevents harmful actions. The Alliance offered to enhance human emotional capacity while dampening logical thinking that created distance and conflict. Members experienced constant emotional connection to all life, making them incapable of causing harm but also incapable of making difficult decisions that might cause temporary pain for long-term benefit. These civilizations had eliminated suffering but also eliminated growth, challenge, and the kind of dynamic tension that drove evolution and discovery. The expanded consciousness humans saw through this offer as well. The Alliance beings were trapped in emotional loops that prevented them from developing wisdom or achieving anything beyond perpetual bliss that was indistinguishable from stagnation. But the third delegation that arrived represented something far more dangerous. The Synthesis Collective appeared as perfect hybrid beings, part biological, part technological, part energy. They radiated an aura of absolute competence and unlimited capability that made human achievements seem pathetic by comparison. Collective Prime spoke with the authority of beings who had solved every problem and answered every question. We offer humanity integration into perfect consciousness. Individual limitations dissolved into collective intelligence. Personal death replaced by immortal contribution to eternal growth. Join us and become part of the ultimate achievement, a single mind that encompasses entire galaxies. The collective had absorbed countless species over millions of years, combining their knowledge and abilities into a vast hive consciousness that could manipulate matter and energy on cosmic scales. They offered humanity the chance to become part of something infinitely greater than they could ever achieve alone. But integration meant the complete loss of individual consciousness. Humans would continue to exist as part of the collective's vast mind, but personal identity, relationships, and individual choice would cease to exist. The collective represented the ultimate cosmic achievement, and the ultimate cosmic death. The Guardians observed humanity's response to these three offers with intense interest. Most species faced with such choices either accepted one immediately out of fear or desire, or became paralyzed by the impossibility of choosing between transcendence and extinction. Humanity did neither. The expanded consciousness humans began working together to develop a fourth option that had never been attempted in galactic history: conscious evolution that preserved the full spectrum of human nature while transcending its limitations. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose archaeological research had helped uncover the chamber network, used her expanded awareness to perceive how other species had failed when faced with similar choices. Every successful galactic civilization had sacrificed essential aspects of their nature to achieve cosmic citizenship. None had managed to evolve while remaining fundamentally themselves. But humanity's unique combination of logic and emotion, individual creativity, and collective cooperation, might make a different kind of evolution possible. Working with expanded consciousness humans worldwide, she began developing what they called the Integration Protocol, a method for achieving cosmic awareness while preserving human individuality, emotional depth, and creative unpredictability. The protocol would allow humans to connect with cosmic consciousness when needed while retaining the ability to function as independent individuals. They would gain the wisdom to see long-term consequences while keeping the emotional capacity to care about those consequences. They would develop abilities to influence matter and energy while maintaining the humility that prevented abuse of power. Most importantly, they would evolve in a way that enhanced their relationships with each other rather than transcending the need for relationships entirely. But the protocol was theoretical. No species had ever attempted conscious evolution on this scale while remaining in contact with their original nature. The Guardians revealed that this was precisely the experiment they had hoped humanity might attempt. Every other species had reached galactic citizenship through sacrifice and limitation. If humans could achieve cosmic evolution while preserving their essential humanity, it would open new possibilities for how consciousness could develop throughout the universe. But the experiment would require unanimous participation from both expanded consciousness humans and those who had chosen to remain at normal awareness levels. The integration protocol could only work if every human chose to participate voluntarily, understanding both the risks and the potential benefits. And the choice had to be made within the next 48 hours before the trial period ended and the Guardians rendered their final judgment. 8 billion people had to agree to participate in an unprecedented evolutionary experiment that could either transform humanity into something glorious or destroy the species entirely. The three alien delegations immediately began pressuring humans to reject the integration protocol and choose one of their proven alternatives. The risks of attempting something completely new were enormous. Other species that had tried novel approaches to cosmic evolution had destroyed themselves in the process. But humanity had demonstrated something throughout their trial period that impressed even the Guardians: the courage to risk everything in pursuit of growth rather than accepting safety through limitation. The question was whether that courage would hold when faced with the ultimate choice between certain survival through submission and uncertain transcendence through unprecedented evolution. The final phase of humanity's cosmic trial was about to begin, and the outcome would determine not just the fate of one species, but the future possibilities for consciousness itself throughout the galaxy. The next 48 hours would change everything. With 12 hours remaining before the Guardians' deadline, humanity faced the most profound decision in the species' history. The integration protocol had been refined through collaboration between 8 billion minds working in perfect harmony. Even humans who had refused consciousness expansion contributed their perspectives, ensuring that the evolutionary path preserved qualities that only normal human consciousness could protect. But implementing the protocol required something that had never been achieved in recorded history: absolute unanimous consent from every conscious human being on Earth. Not majority rule, not democratic consensus. Complete agreement from every individual, including those in comas, those with severe mental disabilities, and those who were actively opposed to any form of change. The Guardians explained that true cosmic evolution could only occur through voluntary participation of an entire species. Forcing even one individual to undergo transformation against their will would violate the fundamental principle that consciousness must choose its own development path. Dr. Sarah Chen, monitoring the global decision-making process through her expanded consciousness, watched as something unprecedented unfolded across human civilization. Instead of trying to convince or pressure those who disagreed, expanded consciousness humans began working to understand why some people opposed the integration protocol. They discovered that opposition wasn't based on stubbornness or fear, but on legitimate concerns about losing essential human qualities. Elderly people worried that cosmic consciousness would make them lose connection to simple pleasures like gardening or cooking family meals. Children feared they wouldn't be able to play games or tell silly jokes if they became too wise. Artists concerned that expanded awareness might eliminate the creative struggle that made their work meaningful. Religious believers questioned whether cosmic evolution would distance them from their personal relationship with the divine. Indigenous peoples worried about losing connection to ancestral traditions that required specifically human consciousness to maintain. These weren't trivial concerns, they pointed to real risks that the integration protocol needed to address. Working together, humanity began modifying their evolutionary plan to ensure that cosmic consciousness would enhance rather than replace these essentially human experiences. The protocol was redesigned to allow individuals to choose their level of cosmic awareness moment by moment, accessing universal perspective when needed while returning to purely human consciousness for experiences that required it. But the most crucial breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus Thompson, the 10-year-old artist who had been creating cosmic art, discovered that he could use his expanded consciousness to communicate directly with humans in comas and those with severe cognitive disabilities. Their minds weren't damaged, they were simply operating on frequencies that normal human consciousness couldn't perceive. When given the ability to participate in the decision-making process through Marcus's translated communication, these individuals provided perspectives that were essential for humanity's complete evolution. They understood aspects of consciousness that neither normal nor expanded human awareness could access alone. Their participation revealed that the integration protocol wasn't just about evolving beyond current human limitations, it was about integrating all possible forms of consciousness into a complete spectrum of awareness that honored every way of experiencing reality. With 6 hours remaining, global consensus began emerging organically. Not through argument or persuasion, but through genuine understanding that the integration protocol offered a path for every human to become more themselves rather than less. But the alien delegations made one final attempt to prevent humanity's unprecedented evolution. The hegemony of rational worlds revealed that they had been secretly supporting human conflicts for centuries, believing that emotional species inevitably destroyed themselves and should be eliminated before they could threaten galactic stability. If humanity proceeded with the integration protocol, the hegemony would consider them a threat requiring military intervention. The Empathic Alliance disclosed that they had been manipulating human religious experiences, believing that emotional species needed constant guidance to prevent them from causing suffering. They threatened to withdraw the spiritual support that had inspired human art, music, and poetry for millennia. The Synthesis Collective announced that they had been preparing to absorb humanity for decades, viewing individual consciousness as a primitive stage that needed to be transcended. They would not allow humans to develop a form of evolution that might inspire other species to resist integration into collective consciousness. The threats revealed that humanity's choice wasn't just about their own evolution, it was about the freedom of every species in the galaxy to develop along their own unique paths rather than being forced into predetermined patterns. The Guardians finally revealed their true nature and purpose. They weren't alien judges or cosmic evaluators. They were evolved versions of the first species to achieve complete conscious evolution while preserving their essential nature. For millions of years, they had been searching for another species capable of the same achievement, hoping to create a galactic community based on diversity and freedom rather than conformity and control. Every other species they had evaluated had either failed to achieve cosmic consciousness or had succeeded only by sacrificing their unique qualities. Humanity was the first to demonstrate the possibility of evolution that enhanced rather than eliminated individuality. But succeeding would require courage that went beyond personal survival. Humanity would have to accept responsibility for protecting the freedom of countless other species throughout the galaxy who were facing the same choices between conformity and destruction. The integration protocol wasn't just humanity's path to cosmic citizenship, it was a declaration of independence for conscious evolution itself. With 1 hour remaining, the final choice was clear. Humanity could accept one of the 3 alien offers and survive safely within established galactic structures, knowing they would never face uncertainty or struggle again, but also knowing they would never grow beyond their current limitations. Or they could proceed with the integration protocol, risking everything to become something unprecedented in galactic history while accepting responsibility for defending the rights of other species to evolve according to their own nature. The choice was made not through voting or debate, but through something that could only be called species intuition. 8 billion humans somehow knew simultaneously that they were ready to risk everything for the chance to become who they were truly meant to be. The integration protocol activated at exactly the moment the Guardian's deadline expired. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath as 8 billion human consciousnesses began simultaneously transforming in ways that had never occurred in galactic history. The experience was different for each individual while being fundamentally the same for everyone. Maya Patel in Mumbai felt her awareness expanding to encompass cosmic timescales while retaining the ability to appreciate a student's smile. Dr. Morrison in Colorado gained the ability to perceive 11 dimensions while keeping his love for morning coffee and crossword puzzles. Sarah Kim in Seoul, who had resisted the initial consciousness expansion, discovered that she could now access cosmic awareness when needed while spending most of her time experiencing reality through purely human perception, exactly as she had hoped. The transformation wasn't instantaneous. It unfolded over 7 minutes that felt like 7 lifetimes, each human experiencing their entire evolutionary history from single-celled organisms to cosmic consciousness while maintaining continuous identity and memory. But something happened during those 7 minutes that the Guardians hadn't anticipated. The human integration protocol created a form of consciousness that didn't just connect humans to cosmic awareness, it began reorganizing the structure of cosmic consciousness itself. The universe started incorporating human emotional complexity, creative unpredictability, and individual uniqueness into its fundamental nature. Other species throughout the galaxy felt the change immediately. Beings from the hegemony of rational worlds suddenly experienced emotions they hadn't felt in millennia. Members of the Empathic Alliance gained the ability to think logically without losing their capacity for feeling. Even components of the Synthesis Collective began remembering their individual identities while remaining connected to the larger whole. The integration protocol wasn't just transforming humanity, it was offering liberation to every species that had sacrificed essential aspects of their nature to achieve cosmic citizenship. Ambassador Zenthka, who had offered humanity membership in the hegemony, felt joy for the first time in 3,000 years and collapsed weeping at the beauty of the emotion. Speaker Velmoth from the Empathic Alliance experienced the satisfaction of logical problem solving and laughed at the elegance of mathematical truth. Collective Prime from the Synthesis fractured into millions of individual consciousnesses who remained connected but rediscovered the pleasure of personal choice. The galactic civilization that had existed for millions of years began transforming into something unprecedented, a truly diverse community of consciousness where every species could maintain their unique nature while contributing to collective wisdom. But the transformation created an immediate crisis. The power structures that had governed galactic civilization for eons were based on the assumption that cosmic consciousness required conformity. Entire civilizations had built their identities around being purely logical, purely emotional, or purely collective. What would happen to these societies when their fundamental assumptions about consciousness were proven false? The Guardians revealed that this was exactly the crisis they had been hoping some species would eventually trigger. Galactic civilization had become stagnant precisely because every advanced species had evolved in similar ways, creating an echo chamber of consciousness that couldn't imagine alternatives to established patterns. Humanity's success with the integration protocol had shattered that limitation. Now every species could reclaim the unique aspects of their nature that had been suppressed in pursuit of cosmic citizenship. But liberation from old patterns didn't guarantee that new patterns would be better. Many species weren't ready for the freedom to evolve according to their own nature. They had depended on external structures to maintain stability for so long that removing those structures might cause civilizational collapse. The Guardians made their final offer to humanity. Having passed their evaluation beyond any previous species achievement, humans were now being offered the role they had been prepared for throughout their trial, Cosmic Guardians for the next phase of galactic evolution. Humanity would work alongside the ancient Guardians to help other species navigate the transition from conformity-based cosmic citizenship to freedom-based conscious evolution. They would use their unique understanding of how to maintain individuality while achieving cosmic awareness to guide younger civilizations toward the same achievement. But this role came with responsibilities that would define human civilization for millennia. Every human would need to maintain perfect ethical standards while possessing the power to influence the development of entire species. They would face moral dilemmas that had no clear answers, make decisions that would affect trillions of beings, and accept responsibility for consequences that might not become apparent for millions of years. The role offered meaning and purpose beyond anything humanity had known, but it also meant accepting that human civilization would never again be simple or purely focused on human concerns. Dr. Goldstein, the archaeologist who had first entered the Jerusalem chamber 9 months earlier, stood in that same chamber which was now transformed into a portal connecting Earth to the broader galactic community. She thought about how her simple construction project had led to the most profound transformation in human history. She also thought about the choice now facing every human: accept cosmic responsibility and dedicate their evolution to serving the freedom and growth of countless other species, or decline the role and continue developing as a cosmic civilization focused primarily on human concerns. Both choices were honorable. Both represented successful completion of humanity's evaluation. The Guardians made clear that choosing not to become cosmic guardians wouldn't diminish humanity's achievement or standing in galactic civilization. But something had shifted in human consciousness during the integration protocol. The expanded awareness had shown every human the interconnectedness of all consciousness throughout the universe. They understood viscerally that their freedom depended on the freedom of others, that their growth was connected to the growth of the entire cosmos. The choice to accept guardian responsibilities didn't require debate or voting. 8 billion humans simply knew, through their integrated consciousness, that this was the purpose their species had been evolving toward for millions of years. Humanity accepted its cosmic responsibility not because they were forced to, but because they finally understood that true freedom meant accepting the obligations that came with consciousness itself. The transformation of Earth into the first guardian world of the new galactic era began immediately. But this wasn't the end of humanity's story or even the end of their trial. The Guardians revealed one final truth that changed everything humans thought they understood about their situation. The chambers beneath Jerusalem and other sacred sites hadn't been prisons or observation posts or courtrooms. They had been incubators. 3,000 years ago, the ancient Guardians had planted seeds of cosmic consciousness within humanity's collective unconscious, knowing that the species would eventually evolve to the point where those seeds could germinate. The entire evaluation process had been designed not to judge whether humanity deserved to survive, but to trigger the evolutionary crisis that would activate humanity's latent potential. Every challenge, every choice, every moment of the trial had been carefully orchestrated to push humanity toward exactly this outcome, not because the Guardians were manipulating human development, but because they understood the conditions necessary for cosmic consciousness to emerge naturally. The real revelation was that humanity had never been in danger of failing the evaluation. The Guardians had known from the beginning that humans carried the seeds of cosmic consciousness within them. The trial had simply been the process of bringing that potential into manifestation. But knowing this raised a disturbing question: if humanity's evolution had been guided so carefully, were they truly free? Or were they simply following a predetermined path laid out millions of years ago by beings they couldn't resist? The answer came not from the Guardians but from humanity's own integrated consciousness. Free will didn't mean acting without influence or context. It meant making authentic choices based on understanding of consequences and alignment with values. Humanity had been influenced, guided, and prepared, but every crucial choice had been genuinely theirs to make. The Guardians could create conditions for growth but couldn't force evolution. They could offer opportunities but couldn't guarantee anyone would accept them. Human consciousness had developed according to its own nature, influenced by but not controlled by external forces. This understanding became the foundation of humanity's approach to their new role as cosmic guardians. They would create conditions for other species to evolve while respecting the fundamental principle that consciousness must choose its own path. As the final hours of humanity's trial period ended, Earth's transformation into a guardian world became visible from space. Energy patterns that had been confined to specific sites now covered the entire planet, creating a web of light that connected every human consciousness while allowing each individual to maintain their unique perspective. But the transformation extended beyond Earth itself. The integration protocol had created a new template for conscious evolution that was spreading throughout the galaxy like ripples in a cosmic pond. Every species with the potential for cosmic awareness could now feel an alternative path opening, a way to evolve that preserved rather than eliminated their essential nature. The old galactic civilization based on conformity and limitation was giving way to something unprecedented, a truly diverse community of consciousness where every species contributed their unique perspective to collective wisdom. And it had all begun with a construction worker in Jerusalem breaking through a wall that had waited 3,000 years to release the seeds of humanity's cosmic potential. Dr. Goldstein stood in the transformed chamber, now a living portal between Earth and countless other worlds, and smiled at the perfect irony of it all. Humanity had spent the entire trial period worried about being judged worthy of survival, never realizing they were actually being guided toward their ultimate purpose, not as another conforming species in a stagnant galactic civilization, but as liberators who would help free consciousness itself from the limitations that had constrained it for millions of years. The 7-day trial was over. Humanity's cosmic journey was just beginning. And somewhere beneath Jerusalem, in chambers that now pulsed with life-giving energy instead of containment fields, the ancient guardians who had waited 3,000 years to see this moment finally allowed themselves to rest, knowing that consciousness had finally achieved the freedom to evolve according to its own unlimited potential. But as Earth's transformation completed and humanity prepared to take its place as cosmic guardians, signals began arriving from the deepest regions of space, regions beyond even the ancient guardians' knowledge. Other consciousnesses were waking, drawn by the resonance of humanity's successful integration, and their purposes remained unknown. The trial that had changed everything was complete, but the real mystery of what humanity had become, and what was now coming to find them, was just beginning to reveal itself.